Welcome back to Module 9. My name's Cullen. We're here continuing our journey through JavaScript on our last leg here before we wrap everything up. Today we're going to talk about how you can use JavaScript to create animations, work with graphics, and also access data, okay? We're not going to do too many demos. Don't hold it against me. Got a lot of good information for you though, okay? Let's get started. All right, our agenda, we're going to talk about using JavaScript to create animations, also to manipulate the canvas, how you can do that with JavaScript. We also want to talk about accessing data, transmitting data, loading and saving files, and also validating form input. We talked about that a little bit earlier, and also touching on cookies again. All right. Animation, of course, is the movement of static images to create the effect of movement. And animation can be used dynamically to move objects in the user interface. We leverage JavaScript to create pretty powerful animations. And like I said, I'm not going to show you a demo, but you do know that we can access individual elements using JavaScript now. And so getting them to perform actions and perform animations should actually be a pretty quick and easy thing. And so some of the stuff that we could talk about is beyond the scope of this course and of the exam. But I strongly encourage you to pursue just more about it, okay? So keep that up and enjoy this animation on screen. It's a crazy star. I didn't do that with JavaScript, just with the magic of PowerPoint, okay? Learn more about creating animations with JavaScript at the Microsoft Developer Network website. You can go ahead and click both of these links. This top one is really great. It's a little bit shorter, and then this second one is really good, but do be aware that it's a little bit longer, okay? Still really good. You should probably read it. All right. Using JavaScript with Canvas. So recall that the canvas element is used to create a container for graphics, right? With JavaScript, you can manipulate that container and draw graphics dynamically. And so we do that with the getElementById method, but we also have to use the canvas.getContext method to create the object itself, right? And so here's an example of how we would do that with Canvas. We'll go to a demo in just a second. Also, there's a cool link to cuttherope.net and a different Microsoft course, and I had to steal it. So I went ahead and added there at the bottom. You can check out that game by clicking that link after you download the PowerPoints. Anyway, here we have Canvas, right? So we've created a canvas element, right? We added in some extra text. Your browser does not support the canvas element if they're using an older browser that doesn't render canvas. Okay, we go ahead, we access the canvas element and store it in a variable in an object C, right? Then we have c.getContext. That's that method that we were talking about earlier, right? The context of it is 2D, okay? So then what we're going to do now is we're going to create the fill style, okay, or rather we're going to set the value of the fill style equal to blue so that we can draw a blue rectangle. It's really important that you use the fill style method before you use the fill rectangle. Think of it like this, right? You couldn't paint a wall unless you went out and you bought paint first, right? You have to have the paint before you can paint a wall, otherwise it's just going to not be painted. Anyway, let's take a look at this example in action, okay? So trust that all of this code is the same stuff that you just saw in the PowerPoint slide deck. We're gonna go ahead and launch the browser, and here, note, I've actually got 2 rectangles. And so it's not. I lied to you guys. I'm so sorry. Sometimes I get so excited that I just want to jump ahead, but what I've done here is we've actually created 2 different canvas objects. So I'm going to go ahead and set the height of one equal to 200, the other a little bit differently. And so now you can see here that we've drawn just one object. You might be like, hey, why on earth do I only see one rectangle on screen? Well, that's because my other canvas object, it's not, sorry, this one is the one I wanted to show you. Sorry, it's not calling the function. So note here, or rather on load, we're calling f1, which is our function right here. And we access the small rectangle. The ID here for small rectangle is where we're drawing that canvas element. This second one, we're not accessing. So I'm actually just gonna go ahead and delete that from my code, and I'll show you here in a second what happens. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit save, go back, and then refresh this again. There you see just one blue rectangle. So I'm sorry for the confusion on that. If you guys go back and take a look at this demo code, go ahead and copy and paste that into WebMatrix yourself, and you'll get a clean, crisp example that makes a little bit more sense. But just a couple of quick things to point out here. Remember that the ID used in the getElementById method has to be the same as the HTML method that you're referring, or sorry, the HTML element that you're referring to. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about transmitting data. Using a web browser is really interesting, and creating robust interactive applications requires the ability the ability to send and receive data. For this to happen, we have to be able to communicate with servers when we're on our phones and on our PCs and laptops and all those other great devices that we use, right? Note that a user's computer, our computers, are commonly called clients, right? We're able to send data back and forth with servers because of things like JavaScript, right? They make the creation of all of our programs possible and the ability to send and receive data possible, right? So here, you've got a computer sending data to a server, and then of course a server sending data back. To further facilitate this, we can use the XML HTTP request API. Right? It uses JavaScript to pass data in the form of text strings between a client and a server. And one thing I want to point out now is that HTML is made of text strings, right? All of our tags, all of our keywords, they're all text strings, right? And so the XML HTTP request API actually just goes ahead and sends those tags back and forth, right? We've got some basic syntax here for the load function to the right, and I want you guys to note the following here, right? So we go ahead and we create a new XML HTTP request object, stored in XHR, right, which is short for XML HTTP request, and then the open method here is going to specify the HTTP method for contacting the server, right? So we use get. It's also going to provide the web address as well for that server, okay? Then when we call the callback function here, we're going to get a response from the server. So we get that response, and then finally, we're going to go ahead and use the send method in order to send data to the server, right? So that's it in action. When we do receive data back from a server, we have to parse which components are going to be used. And so we send all kinds of complex information back and forth. And parsing is the ability to analyze that complex information and break it down into its smaller parts. So with JavaScript, you have a number of options for parsing data so that we can get usernames, access photos associated with those usernames, also get phone numbers, addresses, all that good stuff that we use the web for, right? Get directions, cool stuff like that. With JavaScript, we typically are going to find ourselves using JavaScript object notation to do some of our parsing. And so it's called JSON, right? It's a subset of JavaScript that is used to exchange JavaScript objects with a server. And there are two APIs within JSON, right? You've got the .parse and .stringify APIs. When data is received from a server, the .parse API is used to just go ahead and do the parsing and actually read through the data and break it down into its smaller component parts. And then when the data is sent by a client, the stringify API is used to turn that data into strings so that it can be sent. Next, we'll talk about loading and saving files. So how do we handle data locally, right? JavaScript is wonderful because it actually helps us validate, let me take a step back. JavaScript allows us to load and save files from our local computer, like I just mentioned. Sometimes you're going to ask a user to upload a specific type of file, like maybe I want to go ahead and upload a picture of, there's my dog again, $500 an hour dog model, Stella. But what might happen is that a user might go ahead and try to upload a .doc file, right? We don't want that to happen, and so we can use JavaScript to tell our users that, hey, you're uploading the wrong file. You definitely should upload a JPEG. Do that instead, right? All right, another really important aspect of JavaScript that you need to understand is app cache for offline files. If we want users to be able to access our web pages or our web apps when they're offline, we're probably going to want to implement app cache. Okay? App cache allows us to store data locally when users are offline. And it's going to store resources like the HTML files, CSS files, and JavaScript locally on a user's machines. And so that's what allows them the ability to access those files when they're offline. Sorry guys, I'm getting a little tired today if you can't tell. And finally, the cache manifest file within the app cache API, the application cache API, is going to dictate which type of information is stored offline. That cache manifest file is really just, it's a file that includes a list of all of the different files that are supposed to be stored when a user goes offline. So everything that's in that manifest is going to go ahead and just stay right on your computer after you lose internet connectivity. All right, lastly, we already talked about this with validating form input, and a lot of this can already be done on the client side with CSS and HTML, but JavaScript can also be used to validate user input. And so sometimes, you're going to maybe forget the @ symbol in an email address or forget to write .com. And so JavaScript is used to perform client-side validation in addition to CSS3, right? Or rather, you can use it in lieu of. So maybe we type JNet Live and forget the .com or .org or .net, and then JavaScript can prompt us to provide a valid email address. It's pretty cool stuff. Oh, and one last thing, cookies. And I'm not talking about the kind that you bake. All right. Cookies are small text files that websites save on your computer. Get rid of that second "that" there. They contain information about you and your preferences. And with JavaScript, you can store and retrieve information from cookies. Cookies, as we mentioned before in Module 1, they can cause some problems for people from a security standpoint. They also can cause some slowdown in terms of rendering and viewing content because cookies are actually stored on a server. And so every time that you request a website or access to a page, that cookie may be sent back from the server. So then the browser can use that information to render a page with user information or maybe even help generate ads that are more specific to you and your interests, if you guys are ever curious about that. But people are starting to move away from, developers are starting to move away from the use of cookies in favor of something like app cache and also local storage and session storage, which will store your files and information. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this presentation. This was a pretty quick one. 4.3, we coded animations by using JavaScript, talked about how you would do that, the different types of animations you could create, and also about how you can manipulate a canvas element. We also went ahead and talked about how you can access data using JavaScript, transmitting data, loading and saving files, validating form input, and also cookies. Thanks again for joining me. I really enjoyed it. I'll see you guys again in Module 10, okay?